Hello, if you want to watch exclusive lemon content on What If Naruto, then go to my Boosty. The first link in the description here contains such hot stories for adults, such as What If Naruto was a daddy for Sarada, or Kushina and Mikoto Vulgar Naruto mommies. Follow the link and enjoy. I'm waiting for you.
I hope you like it and burst it, Alex. And if you liked it, don't forget to comment that you liked it and what else you would like to see, as well as put your favorite part in the comments. A greeting and a hug. The sand gradually began to surround Gaara's body as if it were a second skin, while some mounds moved like snakes nearby. I can't get through the two sand defenses with speed alone, he thought, looking intently at Gaara, but if I pick him up and then attack him with the lotus, that sand armor gives off a lot of chakra. If Lee keeps attacking like he's doing, he could win. Naruto commented, smiling. Gaara's brothers came back to see him, impressed, but if he changes tactics so he can do more damage than meets the eye, he may be digging his grave. They agreed, although they didn't think Lee would win anyway, but since he knew that he used a lot of chakra to maintain the sand armor. Who was this kid, and what had happened to the idiot brat from before the exam? Lee smiled and began to untie the bandages on his hands, then he started running at an incredible speed around Gaara, making the sand follow him. And making her crazy and unstable that you are waiting for, Gaara said. He smiled once more and appeared under Gaara, kicking him up, but Gaara's body did not rise as it should. It was much heavier than a normal person for sure. Thanks to his sand armor, he kicked again, lifting him up even more. He continued in this way to keep him away from the ground and firm his sand that was trying to reunite with his master to protect him. When he was at a suitable height, he wrapped Gaara's body with the bandages. Now it was whispered, hugging him and placing him on his head to the other primary. They descended at an incredible speed and crashed into the ground, making it shake again, raising a cloud of dust and lifting concrete stones from the fight arena. The place was silent, while everyone watched in amazement. Gaara's body split in several places, as if the arena had been sectioned. It did, Sakura shouted. I can't believe it, Kankurama said, even more impressed. No, he didn't, Naruto said earnestly, looking behind him. That's a shell. At that instant, the Sunanin's body started to fall and turn into sand, but when it did, Sakura asked. When Gai started praying, it was at the same time that he closed his eyes to her, Kakashi replied in shock. The sand swirled behind Leiden. I was watching Naruto, and Gaara appeared with a bit of his shattered sand armor, smiling like a maniac. He did a hand position, and the sand started moving faster and hit Lee several times. He used too much energy using the lotus, it left him at a disadvantage. Naruto muttered, his advantage muscles being at the maximum of demand. It will not last long. More and more sand started to come out, while Leela avoided as she could. Gaara was enjoying himself a long time ago. I didn't know anyone who could match him a little bit. Her mother was screaming for her blood. She wanted to accommodate her place. The sand began to hit with tremendous force, and with every passing second, the damage was greater, as if it became harder. But he remembered the promise he had given to Gai-sensei. He regained some of his strength. He would never give up, and would become a ninja. To him, that he knew that he could be the greatest taijutsu specialist ninja. He was barely avoiding attacks, but he could react better now that he was calm. The lotus of the hidden village of the leaf blooms twice, Gai murmured. Naruto frowned. Finish this fight, Gai commented seriously. The honey came back to see him, confused. It can open the doors for you, I see it started, but that won't work for you, and your body will end up paying the price. If you really appreciate him and want him to be a great ninja, you will end this fight here and now, or he will stop being a ninja. What did he mean by seeing the doors? Even the Yakugan couldn't do that, but it was too late. If he opens the 8 doors, he will get a power greater than that of the Okage. But if he opens at 8, he's going to die, Kakashi said, watching everything with his Sharingan. I don't know why you did this, Gai, but it's very irresponsible. The other Honin frowned in annoyance. You have no right to tell me anything, you who preferred one of your students over the other two. You shouldn't even be here, let alone lecturing me on what I should have or shouldn't have taught mine. The doors finished opening, letting us see a tremendous power surrounding Lee. his skin turned red, and his eyes white. Waves of celestial chakra were flying everywhere as the concrete was lifted by the same, while Lee sank, burying his feet in the same as if it weighed several tons. A green hula surrounded him while everyone could feel the power surrounding Lee. 4 doors were open now to attack, Neji said, impressed. Just then, Lee shot forward so fast that he created a huge gust of wind as he blew the concrete off the ground like it was nothing. With simple speed, everyone covered their faces trying to fly out. He kicked Gaara in the jaw, picking him up off the ground again. When the wind cleared, they noticed Naruto's chains wrapping around everyone to keep them in place. The redhead was looking up at where Gaara's body was, trying to recover from the attack. There goes Whisper. He appeared on top of Gaara, hitting him hard and sending him back to the ground. He disappeared just as quickly to appear in moments behind the redhead and hit him up again. For the others, it seemed like one of those games. They could only see the ace of the blow in different places. Gaara felt like his armor was starting to break. The force was too much. No one could move like that. And therefore he could not withstand the force and speed of the attack. He tried to move his arms to defend himself of the attack, but he opened the 5th door for him, doing it so fast and strong that Gaara could only receive the attack in the navel. That sent him towards the earth at a dizzying speed. He grabbed a part of Gaara's clothes, pulled him, and hit him again with all his strength to end the fight. The dust kicked up again as they felt how the caused wind was trying to lift them off the ground, and they were only held in place by the chains. Lee fell completely exhausted. When the dust cleared, Gaara was still alive, thanks to the fact that he cushioned the blow with his sand. His pumpkin was gone, which he turned into sand under him. He stretched out his hand towards Lee, directing the same to apprehend the Konoha ninja. Grabbed only the arm and the left leg, sand coffin closed the hand, completely destroying the limbs. El Azabachi screamed in pain, impressed that he would not only have survived, but could attack. He fainted seconds later. Gaara sent his sand again to finish killing him, but Gay moved with speed, preventing the sand from reaching his student. I didn't understand why I was defending him. He failed, he lost, and it is. He was finished. He couldn't even move, as it was possible for me to defend him. I didn't understand. I didn't understand. I didn't understand. The sand returned to recovering him from his damages immediately. The pumpkin formed again on his back. And the winner began to leave himself. He fell over there. When she saw Lei getting up, she could hardly think of being able to stand. Her left arm and leg were too damaged. Naruto appeared as if it were a ghost. Behind Lei, he hit him in the back of the head, ending up knocking him unconscious. He took an excellent companion in his arms, and I look at Gay. The secret lotus strained his muscles too much, left him vulnerable to whatever Gaara did. You'll be lucky if he can walk again, he commented as he handed his student to Gay. She nodded, acknowledging that as a sensei, she trained him very well, but as a family that he considered he had completely failed by not finishing the fight, no matter how confident he was that he would beat La Whisper. It's impressive. The only thing that kept him going was his will. He would have been an excellent ninja, and even more an excellent companion, Naruto muttered, walking. Looking towards Gaara, when we face each other, and you will know the fear. Gaara diverted and started walking again. Winner, Gaara said to Yate as she motioned for the paramedics to come in, and they will take Lo away. While they were explaining the next phase of the exam, no one could pay attention. They were nervous about Gaara. They were distracted by what they had witnessed, and they were melancholy about how their partner ended up. But for the ninjas of other villages, it was not so important. They were taught from a young age that there were no heroes in the ninja world. The fort eats villages. That was and always would be his world. Now take one of the papers in the box to find out who it's your turn to fight. Anko passed in front of each one, holding out a wooden box with a hole for the hand. When she arrived near Naruto, she smiled a little flirtatiously, winked at him, and continued on her way. Now open them and say the number from left to right, Irizen commented. 8, Dosu said. 5, muttered bored Naruto. He drew them. 1. His brother was next. 3. 6. Gahara said. 9. Susuro Shikamaru has been bored and wanting to take a look at the clouds. 7. Neji said with annoyance, he didn't understand what the hell they were doing. 2. He mentioned Shino. Irisina felt although a little worried, therefore, Sasuke is the 4th. He commented, now Ibiki shows the way they will fight. The scarred man turned over a tablet showing the championship system for the finals, so it's my turn against Gaara, Naruto smiled. Everyone saw who it was their turn to fight, some upset, some excited. Naruto, whisper Sakura worried about her partner, the redhead was strong, he had proved it. But a month would be enough to prepare properly and fight someone like Gaara. Sarutobi approached Naruto smiling with concern. Her grandson was about to fight someone. Someone who was afraid even of him, and no, it wasn't because of his appearance or his way of being. Or because of the killer instinct intimidating everyone without real control of it. It was because he knew who Gaara was, he knew that he had been treated almost as badly as Naruto for being the Ichibi container. A beast with a tail, and from the little I had seen, a beast with a tail that had some control over its container. It was practically a bomb, about to explode at the slightest opportunity. He hadn't wanted that boy in his village, not so much because of how dangerous he could be, he was sure. With some help, he could stop the Ichibi without causing too much fuss in the village and without a harm to the deranged boy. He was more afraid that Naruto would see someone similar in Gaara. He was more afraid that the Sunanin would change Naruto's idea for Konoha. Not only did he see the boy as a grandson, and no, I didn't want to have to stop him for whatever reason, escaping from the village to become a renegade ninja, for example. But it could also be possible that the Kyuubi arrives in Naruto with that and a pandemonium breaks out that would put the caused by the same creature 13 years ago in shame. The redhead smiled when he saw Irison approaching, and it seems to you that I was amazing enough in my first fight. Although with his way of acting, it seemed that he was being smug, his eyes and voice showed other completely different things. Exceptional, he replied. The funny old man, perhaps too exceptional, sighed but laughed slightly. The faces of some of the Honen were priceless. Naruto laughed along with Sarutobi, impressed that the one of all people made fun of the Honen. He usually saw it as quite serious, and hardly made mention of work when they were together in more family moments. But I knew how some of the ninjas could be uptight, having as main reference that it was almost not to be surprised. So making fun of them was very rewarding and too easy. Do you think the council will try anything? He asked more seriously. Not at the moment, he replied gently. I'm sure they'll complain that you're a danger and all that stuff. He sighed again and rubbed the bridge of his nose. But they must be interested in the Keek and Genka, and so they won't do anything very drastic. Mind you, anyway, be careful. Especially because Dans should already know that Naruto was not only the container of the Kyuubi, but he had a bloodline, and at all costs he would try to recruit him. Don't worry, he smiled excitedly. I have plans to train. And I don't think it's that easy to catch me off guard. He nodded relaxed. He knew that Naruto could sneak away from a hole and squad he would be fine for this month. And once he was declared a Chunin with all his rights, no one could lay a finger on him with that the state. I'd be more relaxed. What are your plans for training? He asked interested. He had thought about talking to Jiraiya to train him, but knowing the boy in front of him, and with his new way of being, he was sure that he would end up killing the Sanin Toad in his sleep. She shuddered with fear. Her precious books could not disappear, not until the sweet little Kyoko achieves her goal. She smiled as the drool trickled down her cheek, and blood started dripping from her nose. Naruto looked at him confused, although he could imagine what the old pervert was thinking. Mainly train my bloodline. With a look I make it clear that I would not only train with one, but I also plan to fix my taijutsu poses. Practice much more taijutsu, other styles, kenjutsu, among other things. He nodded although he was interested in the part. In that he had to correct his taijutsu postures. What do you mean by correcting your taijutsu? I didn't realize it before. He shook his head, knowing how stupid it had been, like not realizing something so clear. Damn his father's seal. They taught me everything wrong, the simplest thing. I do it wrong. With what I was taught, I have had a devilish luck to be able to survive. The only thing it serves is to hurt myself. He frowned with annoyance that had to be investigated. The Ninja Academy was run by the Ninja Council, but its representative was Yashi Ikaga. He couldn't do anything to change the teaching or that kind of thing, but for the ninjas who sabotaged a student, that yes. He had every right to punish them as he saw fit, and if Yashi knew about this and didn't do anything to fix it, he would. To be in a lot of trouble too. Come on, I'll take you to the village, Sarutobi said, smiling. He would worry about all that later. You have to go to the hospital to get checked out, and then you can go wherever you like to train. Although always keeping to the village limits. Naruto nodded even though he circled the eyes. She placed her hand on her grandfather's arm, and they disappeared with a burst of smoke. When he opened his eyes, they were in the village at the entrance of the Okage Tower. He made a mental note to learn that jutsu that was very useful. He thanked the walk and headed towards the hospital, for sure. Kakashi was already there checking his precious, beautiful, and so many other things. He was not interested in Uchiha. The only thing that the ninja had of interest was the Chidori that he had seen him use on his mission. In the land of waves. He would train himself, he just needed one that. Another piece of advice here and there. He needed counselors, not a teacher who most assuredly won't train him in the slightest. He could only do so much more than be waiting for someone to deign to train him as he should. I would look for someone to ask for advice on everything I would like to learn out there. Example, and as crazy as he was the best taijutsu specialist ninja there was, or Neko the ninja Ambu. Would be the best to ask for advice in Kenjutsu. If that would be much better than having a teacher, it also suited him because he could advance at his own pace instead of the pace he set to his instructor. Finally, he could steal the ninjutsu that he liked. They were ninjas for a reason. They specialized in stealing information. It would be simple to steal the Chidori when he was doing it, or most certainly, showing it to Sasuke. He smiled at the idea. He already wanted to see Kakashi's face when he used his jutsu without having been taught it. In addition, he would have to face his worst enemy, but he was sure the end would be worth it. The much feared and hated library. Led by the worst monster that could exist in the elemental nations, the director was not sure how the devil was still alive. She was much older than the Okage, and 1,000 times stronger, but she would have to overcome that demon in order to study. He made a disgusted grimace. He preferred the practice 1,000 times, but that it was going to be done. He was sure that in that seedy den, he would find valuable information for his training. He had to make a heart of his chest and endure the torture that was coming. He arrived at the hospital a couple of minutes later, just as Sakura and Ino were leaving the place. With a couple of bandages here and there, but from the way he behaved, it seemed that their friendship. He was resurfacing very well. I was happy for them. When they saw him, their eyes flashed, and they ran out to talk to him. Are you coming to the checkup too? Hino asked, smiling. He nodded, looking at both of them. I see they are fine. He smiled as much as Hino doing. May you both blush. I'm glad your friendship is resurfacing. You should have never separated in the first place. The pale pink of their cheeks rose slightly in tone, but they smiled somewhat wistfully. Something changed in that fight. Susu Rosa heals, but I'm really glad there is. Already done, he looked at Hino, and then returned his gaze to Naruto. I was still impressed by how tall he was. His face hadn't changed drastically, but he looked much more mature. I wasn't sure if it was just the hair, or if her features had really changed. Be that as it may, he looked very good. Not only our friendship, he boasted, and not sticking out his chest, which inevitably attracted Naruto's gaze. He blushed and had to quickly look away. We have decided to take ninja training seriously. Naruto looked at Sakura, who was nodding happily. Great. He commented, as excited as if he had never changed, but they couldn't blame him. That was something to celebrate. He could finally see those two behaving like what they were. Kunoichis from the Hidden Leaf Village. Maybe we could train a couple of times together. They nodded quickly. For some reason, they were desperate to spend time with the guy in front of them. It would be very good. Sakura said, already thinking about what they could do. He was extremely intelligent. The theoretical part of being a ninja was etched in his brain. His problem was the practical part, but apparently Naruto was the opposite. They could complement each other very well. But there would be no problems with your training. He was instantly worried. Naruto was fighting Gaara. You know, your fight in the finals is very dangerous. He waved his hand, dismissing the idea. Don't worry. Besides, not only you would improve a lot with that. It would serve me a lot to train with someone else. It's different than doing it alone. But Kakashi-sensei, Hino asked confused, isn't he supposed to train you for the finals? Naruto laughed a little, but not in mockery, at least not for them. Do you seriously think that attack would even take the time to consider training me and not Sasuke? He laughed even louder. No, he's probably already thinking about how to train Lucia for the best of me. Sakura thought a little about everything that was said. She hadn't realized it until Naruto had mentioned it in the preliminaries. But now, thinking about how those first months had been, as Genin was clearly realizing how his sensei assigned had completely neglected them. Hell, now he was wondering how the fuck he survived the mission in the Land of Waves. The only thing he could do was throw a few kunai with good accuracy, and the only thing he learned after that was how to climb a tree with chakra. Even with that alone, he got tired after a few climbs. Damn, she wasn't a ninja in the slightest, but she was determined to get better. I'd stop watching Naruto go forward while she just stood there. I'd walk beside him anyway, and who's going to train you then? Asked the interested Pink Movie. Alone, I don't need anyone. I would just pigeonhole myself and head towards a single point. If I train, I can only train what I feel like. The world is the limit, and I plan to overcome it even. She spoke with such strength and confidence that she stood there fascinated by the boy. I just need a few guidelines so I know I'm doing the right thing. Of course, she blushed a little and scratched the back of her neck. They laughed. Definitely part of the old Naruto was still present, which was very rewarding. Naruto had been like the sun. He brought joy to everyone with his way of being. The fact that he had matured enough did not mean that it had been lost. Well, then we can help you a lot, said Ino, hitting Sakura's back. Even the forehead here is a walking library. She laughed when she received the annoyed look from her friend. We are the theory and you are the practice. The training will go well. Naruto nodded with a half-sideways smile. He would take care of properly rumbling these two at the same time they helped him. I was looking forward to starting the training. Anyway, I'd better come in for the checkup. At once. They nodded, and with a farewell walked away. Naruto entered the hospital, but had not passed the 10 meters. When Kakashi appeared in front of him, reading his porn novel as usual. Naruto, I plan to train Sasuke, but don't worry. He raised his head, as he realized that Naruto had already surrounded him, and was walking towards the counter. Miss, I want to get checked up after the preliminaries of the Chunin exam. The nurse opened her mouth, impressed with the boy she saw in front of her. Surprised, she lightly took out a few papers and handed them to him. Please fill out this form, and a doctor will treat you right away. He nodded and walked away again. Naruto, as I was telling you, had to shut up again because of Naruto walking away. Listen to me, damn it, he exploded angrily. You don't need to tell me anything. Attack, the red-haired man replied, staring. With those piercing and terrifying violet eyes, I have little interest in what you and your little boyfriend are doing. I don't need you to get me an instructor, and I don't need you to talk to me again, unless you want me to cut your tongue out. With that, he walked away again and sat down on one of the comfortable sofas of the waiting room. Kakashi was so surprised that he didn't even complain about what was said or the way he was told. Seeing a large part of the doctors and patients seeing him, he decided to quickly walk away. He disregarded as quickly as he could. Appeared in a hospital hallway and started walking towards his Nobi's room. Sasuke's. That boy is getting worse and worse. He finds out he has a bloodline and already thinks he's the king of the elemental nations. I'll have to talk to Okage-sama to get him to do something. He turned a corner and saw two ambutirados on the ground. He quickly approached. And he took their pulse. They were dead. He hurriedly opened Sasuke's door and found the white movie, who surrendered in the preliminaries, close to his ward. He quickly raised his hand to catch the scalpel that Kabuto had held in his hand a few seconds ago. "What do you want with Sasuke?" he asked, stepping forward, ready for a battle. "That's for me to know," Kabuto replied with a smile, turning around. "You're very good, aren't you? Ninja who copies." She seemed to be making fun of him, which bothered him a lot. He wouldn't talk much, or I'll have to show him good manners, picked up a crib, and took a step closer. "Are you allied with Orochimaru?" Kabuto smiled. "Who knows?" he replied with a shrug. "Anyway, you'll find out later, even if I'm not in this place." He took out his own crib and special, and placed it close to Sasuke's throat, "But I wouldn't be so confident. Clearly I have all the advantage here." With a quick movement, Kakashi managed to make Kabuto stay on the ground. He immediately noticed how one of the supposedly dead Ambus stood up, smiled as his clone entered the place and circled to Kabuto. He was about to attack again when the other body got up and fled through the window. He peeked out only to realize it was the real one. Being the son of the hospital's chief medical officer, it gave him an advantage, he muttered, looking at the two bodies on the floor. "He is too good. He would be very dangerous if he is working for Orochimaru." I returned to see Sasuke, sighing to see him well, still unconscious for everything that had happened, but well, after all. I checked the curse mark, realizing that it was completely under control. He was awesome even being there. He could master the brand perfectly. There was definitely no ninja more impressive than Sasuke. He smiled a little, placing a hand on the forehead of the jet, and relaxed for the moment. He came out of the office completely the same as he came in. The doctor had been so impressed with his change that checked him out still, and when he wanted him to get away from the hospital as fast as he could. After all, such a change could become the most important discovery made by a doctor. He just had to study it. But when they entered the office and he felt those vivid eyes, Violetus, watching it attentively, became so terrified that he simply checked it. He almost peed out of fear at having Naruto watch him so intently for so long. It was strange because certainly the redhead didn't do anything to make him feel that way. He had attended enough ninjas to know when he was trying. As he was leaving the hospital, he picked up a smell that he recognized immediately, smiled a little, and went to the room where that delicious smell was most concentrated. She opened the door carefully and laid her eyes on the jet-haired beauty. She was asleep and was sighing softly. Between dreams, he again caught the strange smell that he perceived in the preliminaries. He wondered what it was, so he went over to check on the girl. He just hoped she wouldn't wake up, and he thinks it's a stalker. A pervert. He was completely sure that even his explanation would not save him from a beating. He grimaced when he noticed the strongest smell. "It smells like dead," he complained while coughing softly. "But where does it come from?" It was as if that smell stuck to the delicious smell that Kim gave off. With some fear and trembling, she reached out to take the blanket and lifted it up. She quickly gave birth, quickly blushing to notice that she was only wearing her underwear. He took a quick breath, trying to calm his racing heart. It was the first time he had seen a girl like that, and although the view had been magnificent, he did not want to become a pervert. Well, at least not when the situation doesn't require it. She reached over again and lifted the blanket, breathing heavily from what she knew she would see. She scanned Kim's fabulous body. Her black underwear contrasted against the pale skin, but it made her look really good. Before his mind went down the gutter, he noticed a species of tattoo on the girl's flat belly button. Surprised, he touched the strange symbol, immediately noticed that the smell of death was coming from that. Immediately remembered the seal that had the same in the same place, so this is Kinjutsu. Studied the seal carefully, tracing each pattern, and every rune recorded. "What are you doing?" asked a voice somewhere between angry and embarrassed. Naruto felt his skin peel off his bones as he jumped backwards. I was alone. I was looking everywhere as red as his hair, and I was moving my hands on one side To another trying to explain with gestures what he could not with words, delicious smell, dead smell. He fell down when he heard the laughter. He came back to see Kim, who was sitting in her place, still half naked, laughing at him. She did not complain, the sight of the beautiful girl dressed in that way with the sound of her laughter as a background. She had him in a strange trance, as if his brain had turned into mash. "You are very funny," Kim said. When she realized how the guy was watching her, she blushed a little and covered up. "What were you doing here, and seeing me naked?" He woke up quickly, and shook his head and hands at the same time. "No, I wasn't seeing you," he replied. "Well, if I was watching you, but that's not why I came." He fell down, taking a deep breath, so as not to confuse himself and the girl. "Well, I followed this smell all the way here, but suddenly I smelled another like me. Dead?" "What do you mean you smelled?" she asked, slightly annoyed, thinking that I was telling her that she smelled bad. "Well, my senses are improved," he commented gently so as not to bother the girl anymore. "You smelled delicious, the truth," he whispered, blushing, "but at the same time, that very strange smell of death was coming from you, so check a little and notice that seal." He pointed at her belly button. "That's where that smell comes from." Kim tilted her head in confusion. "This stamp, she gave it to me gold." She fell right away, knowing she couldn't say anything. Naruto narrowed his eyes. "I knew he worked for Orochimaru because of the mild snake smell." "Whatever it is," Naruto said so he wouldn't keep squirming instead. "It shouldn't be any good if it gives off the smell of death." He looked at the boy carefully. "Do you think he's bad?" she mentioned, confused. "Why would she give me something? Something bad?" He shrugged his shoulders. "I guess you know Orochimaru much better than I do," he muttered, ignoring the girl's astonished look. "But from the little I know of him, no one is interested in him but himself. If he gave you that seal, it's for something extremely bad, at least for you." He approached a step and moved his hand nervously. "I can see it. I have something similar." He sent chakra to his navel so that the seal would be shown. They spent a minute silently studying each other before Kim removed the blanket and stood up for Naruto to look at the seal carefully. "Finjutsu." Naruto shook his head slightly, distracted by the seal. "I can't say that I know about Finjutsu, but somehow I seem to understand it. Not so much as to tell you exactly what it is or how it works." He shrugged his shoulders and ran his finger through a rune. He was sending small amounts of chakra, using it as a sonar, had occurred to him at that moment, using his sensory ability, merging the two. He could somehow recognize what kind of seal it was. He ran his finger along the rune in the center, and immediately felt dizzy, and felt like pumping. It was just as if the seal exuded death. Kim saw Naruto turn pale, and got scared. "What's the matter?" "I'm not completely sure what it is," he commented, getting up and sitting down on the bed. He was having a hard time standing up. "At first it seemed like something. A summoning seal, but then I noticed that it connected to your life and something. I don't know how to say it." He shook his head. "But studying the rune in the center, I realized that it's a sacrificial seal of some kind." The Jet sat next to Naruto, just as pale. "And you're telling me that I'm going to be used as a sacrifice," she whispered. "Yes, that's all I can get to, although I don't know much about stamps." He sighed, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder, and smiled. "Don't worry, my family has been an expert in Finjutsu for a long time. I am going to study and research about this stamp, and we will see the way to undo it, or at least pass it on to someone else." I hug him for some reason, feeling much better. Naruto's presence, voice and hand on her shoulder reassured her and gave her the assurance that he would be fine. "Why are you doing this?" The red-haired man shrugged his shoulders and smiled. "I guess it's in my nature to help people when I can." She smiled and shook her head. "At least when I like that person." They said goodbye, agreeing to meet at the entrance to the Forest of Death to continue studying about the seal, and Naruto left. He went straight to his apartment. I was tired and wanted to get some sleep. He would rest the rest of the day, and could start with his training the next day. While he was walking, many people were coming back to see him, clearly not. They didn't recognize him as the demon boy, but the most surprising thing was to see women pining for him. He wasn't used to that kind of reactions. He ignored it as best he could and went on his way. On the way to his apartment, he decided to go into Ishirakurumen to buy some. From the most delicious dish on the face of the earth, with a smile he entered the premises and made himself present. Although much calmer than before. There he already came out of the back smiling, but he was completely stunned when he saw the handsome man standing in the entrance. I was about to start watching, when I noticed the marks on the cheeks, as if they were whiskers. "Naruto, is you?" she asked, confused. The redhead smiled and nodded, approaching. "A lot of things have changed there too, Mekan," he mentioned, sitting down, "but if it's me." The chestnut looked him up and down, at least as far as she could see, and remembering what she had seen, Naruto was his height. His body was muscular, the face seemed to have lost all the baby fat, the long hair, red with black spots, made him look like a bad boy. "You're hot," he blurted without realizing it. He immediately blushed as much as Naruto's hair and covered his mouth with his hands. Naruto looked at her a little, blinked a couple of times and smiled. "Thank you," he said happily. It was the first time someone said something like that to her instead of to Sasuke. "You are very beautiful." He nodded as he looked at the board, congratulating himself for having responded so well and so quickly, even without stuttering. He didn't notice how she was blushing at me for being in his own world. "So, what do I give you?" he questioned the girl, trying to put aside strange ideas for the moment. "Until a week ago, I thought of the blonde idiot as a rather annoying and noisy brother, and now that he had become that red-haired god, the only thing I could think about was committing incest." He had to calm down, then he could come to terms with his feelings and ideas. At the moment, the best thing was not to see Naruto would end up pulling him behind the bar and raping him. "Give me 10 bowls of pork ramen to go." He nodded, still looking away, and started to prepare the meal. I was so used to making ramen for Naruto that I was making it at an incredible speed. And without even noticing, he supposed that was one of the advantages of having such a demanding client. The others seemed to just walk at a snail's pace. Anyway, he couldn't help but see Naruto out of the corner of his eye, eating that body with his eyes and salivating as he imagined passing by. His tongue down the pecs and bite the shoulder. He shook his head quickly and mentally admonished himself. "I finish preparing the food, pack it up, and hand it to her." "Thanks, I'm going to start training for the finals, so I guess we won't see each other for this month." He waved goodbye the hand and walked away. He hadn't noticed anything there anymore. Toiki entered at that moment, and was surprised to see his daughter standing like a statue on the bar. He touched her shoulder and moved her a little. "Daughter, are you okay?" I was already completely red there. "Dad, I think I want to commit incest," he mentioned, making the poor man turn pale, then red as a tomato, took a couple of steps away, and clutched his chest where his heart was hammering fast. I stutter. "I don't think I feel the same as your daughter. Your mother, she is the most important thing to me." There I see him frowning again. "What the hell do you think, you old pervert?" He punched him in the face, knocking him to the ground, then blushed again, and looked towards the exit. "Do you think Naruto likes older women?" The sore man stayed on the floor, looking at his daughter as if she was crazy, because, "Why don't you ask her?" she commented gently so as not to attract her daughter's fury again. Anyway, he was calmer now that he knew what Ayami was referring to. As for the incest thing, it didn't end because Ayami beat him up again. "I'm sure if I put on a little more revealing clothes I'll attract Naruto's attention." She smiled, walking away, ignoring her father moaning in pain on the floor. "I can't believe you're that kind of pervert, Dad. You're the last straw." Toiki could only think that the women were completely crazy. Naruto arrived at his apartment calmly. For some reason, the guys who used to annoy in the red light district ran out when he looked at them. Better for him, so he didn't have to be worrying about beating them up. His ramen would get cold if he delayed. He entered the austere and broke down. Next to the one-room apartment, a living room, a bathroom and a kitchen. He left the ramen in the counter that separated the kitchen from the dining room because the table had a patched leg, and he didn't want his food to be washed down by accident. He sat down and started eating, thinking about how to start his training. Also, I had to do some research on that seal on Kini's belly button. I had to improve many shortcomings. It would be a pretty tiring month, I was sure. Now that I thought about it, I was going to spend a lot of time with several beautiful girls. I was in luck. He continued to eat without noticing how the fox. He was laughing in his head. "Oh brat, you don't know how lucky you are." He laughed some more. "At first it will hurt, but in the end, you will thank me, I'm sure." He finished with a ghoulish laugh before getting stuck and having to stop to be able to breathe. Dans was attentively studying the papers handed to him by one of his root Sambu. The first part was about Orochimaru appearing in the Chunin exams in search of Sasuke Uchiha. He was frustrated because it turned out that the treacherous snake had managed to implant a curse mark on him. That guy of Genjutsu can endow the wearer with a lot of power, an impressive power that tempted you, made you addicted, so you sought more. You needed to get more power, but there came a point where the body could no longer stand it, and Greek. You were dying, just like that. The Uchiha already had mental problems. That's why he had told Sarutobi that he would take him to destroy all his feelings and reasoning, so that he becomes a killing machine loyal to the village, but mainly loyal to him. I do not accept in the same way that he refused to let me take the Hinchkriki. They would have been two amazing and powerful useful weapons for Konoha, but Irizen's idealism was a problem. He had to disappear it somehow to take the position of Okage and get to the village firm where he should be. Now he had a problem. If he knew Orochimaru as well as he thought, the very stupid one left part of his chakra at the curse mark, which would make the Uchiha seek him out for more power. He didn't know what he wanted with the brat, but he was sure it wasn't anything good for his plans, but he couldn't do anything. If he lifted a finger against Sasuke Uchiha, he would have Irizen and the tips about of him, which he did not want, so to get rid of that pestilence for the moment was denied. The second part of the report was what interested him the most. He could be killing two birds with one stone. If he played his cards correctly. Naruto Uzumaki, that child would have been his work teacher, but she couldn't catch him in time. Not only was he the container of the nine-tailed fox, but he was an Uzumaki. And now he was a complete Uzumaki. Apparently, he always thought something went wrong when the Squinkle was born because he didn't have his mother's red hair. Now he was fixed and improved, and he had an impressive bloodline, absolute defense, fast, accurate and powerful attack. With a little training, he would be even better than I thought. He already showed an impressive ability in the exams, and that which he had only discovered. His ability recently, in a month it would be fantastic to see him. If he managed to control that Kik and Genkai, along with the power of the fox, he could not only lead the village to the top, but he could conquer the other great elemental nations. If he acted under the shadows, he might as well make the Uzumaki get rid of Lucia before Orochimaru can take him away. As I was saying, two birds with one quick and precise shot. Besides, with that I could get to murder Sarutobi. And once I reached the position he deserved, I would attack the other villages, and what had never been done, unite in one the elementary nations, all led by him. I want them to spy on Naruto Uzumaki night and day, he commented, leaving the papers on his desk. I want to know what he is doing every second of his life. It is necessary that they know how to do everything from him, and I want a detailed report on the same thing every day. There, said the Ambura with the mask of a wolf. With that he disappeared, heading to Naruto's apartment to spy on him as he was told to do. Dans took other papers on his right side and read them quickly, so that Suna has been increasing his military armament. He muttered, reading attentively, another one too. He stood thinking for a moment that he could represent this if both villages were raising their armament. It meant that they were trying something. The problem was that it could be that both villages had a disagreement and were preparing to attack the other. It would also not be the first time a cage attacked on a whim. There were so many variables that it was difficult to know which one could be the real one, but if both of them attacking each other could be a good thing. I had heard that Otto was an awesome village that was leveling up quickly. No one knew who their leader was. But to have such awesome shinobi in their ranks in such a short time was someone very powerful and intelligent. If he was right, Suna had all the chances of losing that battle, and he might need Konoya's help. He could take advantage of that altercation to assassinate Irizen. It would be the perfect excuse. He just had to think about how to get the most votes to be the next Hokage. Keep looking into whether this is going to lead to a war that I want to know, he said, looking at the two ambus in front of him, one with a falcon mask and the other with an owl mask. They both disappeared to follow orders, while Dan smiled at how things were turning out. With each passing day, it seemed that he would find it easier to get what I wanted. I just needed one thing. One extremely important thing. Naruto Uzumaki was the key. It was the key that would open the doors to something extremely big and important. He kept looking at the picture of the now red-haired man. He had waited years for this, and finally, with a single change, everything. It seemed to fit where it should. I just had to wait a little longer. A couple of days had passed since the end of the preliminaries. Naruto had found a good place to train. It was far from the village. Nearby, he had a natural hot springs that served to refresh his muscles after intense training. He was practically hidden between a hillside and the huge, thick forest trees, so no one bothered him there. The place was so far away from the village that it hardly fulfilled the condition of the Hokage not to leave the limits of the same story. He had found it by pure chance. The day after the preliminaries, he had noticed a ninja spying on him. No one knew about his sensory ability, so he could feel the spy's chakra, but he was hiding very, very well, so much so that sometimes he had to rely only in their hypersensitive senses. He had been running away from the ninja, trying to lose him without him noticing. By the time he succeeded, he was extremely far away from the village and was staring in amazement at the hidden hot springs. He made sure that the place was kept completely secret, because it seemed like a little paradise. After admiring the place a little, he decided to start training, starting with chakra control. Their reserves were so great that walking through the trees was not enough. It was at that moment that he remembered the attack fight with Zabuza. They had been fighting over the water, as if it were solid ground. He tried to do it with the same method of walking on trees, and soon realized that it was useless. He ended up soaked and slightly frustrated, undressed so that his clothes could dry, and got into the water, then got up 1 foot and concentrated chakra to see how it worked in the water. He realized right away what the problem was. By concentrating a certain amount of chakra on the sole of the foot, it only allowed a small point to remain stable. But since the water was constantly changing, that point disappeared immediately, and therefore lost the support. He was constantly changing his feet all day to see how he had to concentrate the chakra in his feet to stay above water. When he returned to his apartment, he was extremely tired, and his leg muscles hurt like never before. But he was also determined to stand on the water. So he spent 2 more full days, but by the evening of the 3rd day, he was standing quietly on the water. The next thing was walking, but he understood it very quickly. Only practice was missing, and more practice than he realized. It's like his chakra control was improving with every day he practiced. The problem is that his chakra was increasing, and again he had to start. So he came up with several ideas to improve his control quickly. They were practically suicidal methods, such as doing push-ups, leaning on the tip of a kunai. With his chakra, he had to keep the kunai perpendicular to the ground at all times. At the same time, he had to stay on the kunai with a thin layer of chakra so as not to hurt himself, and at the same time towards the push-ups. As I was saying, suicidal methods. But I had no choice unless I wanted to get in trouble. His tremendous reserves not only affected his control, but he wasted abnormal amounts of it with every technique he did. And by wasting chakra, the technique used also lost power. He also spent time practicing with his 3 Kik and Genkai, if he wanted to play a good role in the finals and not only win, but show Gaara what terror was. Then he had to manage his skills the best he could. If he could manage to combine them, even better. But he didn't just spend time training. He also ventured into hell. That old Cerberus lookalike scared the crap out of him when he came in, but he let it go by practically threatening not to make a sound. Or he'd know a bigger pain than the worst torture done by a Vicky. He wanted to run out to the shelves to get away from life. Old, but when her slipper squeaked on the clean floor, she could even see her reflection. The woman sent her a look that made her blood run cold. I didn't know how Konoha needed ninjas with that old lady. If the Okage thought of using her on the front line for some war, they had the victory in the pocket. Anyway, he started looking for everything he could find in the library that would be useful, and as I hope, he found a section full of tomes for ninjas, aged and dusty. It seemed that no one had touched them in decades. Most of them were ninjutsu. Category C, nothing very impressive, but if used correctly, it could be as effective and harmful as ninjutsu. Category A, there were all kinds of techniques, from fire that was the most common, to wind that had the least. In one of the books, he found out that every ninja owned an affinity. There were few people who could use two, like Aku, who fused wind and water to make ice. Logically, you didn't just need the affinity to be able to make ice, at least not to such an impressive level as Aku's. You had to have an affinity to the ice itself. He understood why there were so few wind techniques, since in Konoha the affinity was almost zero. To find out what affinity he had, a special paper was needed, made on the basis of a tree that fed on chakra. If the paper was cut, it was wind. If it crumpled, it was lightning. If earth was broken to pieces, if water was wetted, and if ashes were made fire. He immediately looked for where to buy the paper. He found it in one of the specialized stores for ninjas, but it was one of the stores that hated it. If they didn't send him out, they charged him for the simplest things at the price of the most more expensive. He didn't want to know how much the paper would charge him. He thought about going in and trying his luck with his change of appearance, but he had realized that the word had spread, and everyone already knew about it. What's more, he had heard a rumor that the one who was in possession of his body. Now, poor deluded, stupid people. Anyway, he had to find another way to get the role, and the only one he could think of, and it would work, was to swallow his pride and ask someone for help. He immediately thought of his grandfather figure, but he should be very busy if the screams that I heard when he approached the tower, they were saying something to him. Luckily, a very beautiful angel came down from heaven, literally, and helped him. Technically, Karena, and it had fallen on him, as he was jumping from roof to roof without realizing it. Not that he complained about being imprisoned by those big ones. Of whether soft breasts had been an experience equal to eating ramen. Having a little conversation, she had come out with what she wanted, and Karena, and very upset to find out what they were doing in the store. Offered to buy everything she needed, she just had to say it and it was done. He attached a genjutsu strong enough for civilians, but not for ninjas, and they entered the store quietly. At the end, he not only bought the paper, but practically paraded a number of garments to a blushing and almost drooling Karena, and who seemed to be having a lot of fun. All he was mortified. Especially since she even made him try on underwear. How embarrassed he had been to walk out almost halfway to the store, wearing only a black boxer with a few orange foxes. Why did she have those kind of clothes if they hated foxes? He didn't know, but he had liked it. Apparently Karena liked it better, and even Anko and Anna, her two best friends who had seen her while walking outside the store, showed up. Between 3 o'clock, I had made him turn so red that I wasn't sure how he didn't spontaneously combust right there. Luckily, the torture had not lasted much longer, and she was able to go to her apartment to leave the new clothes. And immediately tried the paper, loaded some chakra, and waited a couple of seconds. The paper was torn in half, one of the halves crumpled, and the other did make ashes. I was amazed that I had not only a date. 3 affinities, as far as I knew, was very rare, more to a serum. In the end, the wind was his strongest affinity, but with practice, he could make these 3 affinities extremely powerful. Too bad he hadn't had a combination. He had liked the lava or storm element. But with his 3 Kik and Genkai, why did he want more? Now, knowing what his affinities were, he focused on finding techniques from them, but he did not neglect the other 2. Because even if they were not very strong, He could make techniques that could save his life if necessary. To the final, a week after starting his training. Although it seems that he did not make much progress, he had done it in spades. He had a great variety of ninjutsu techniques, his chakra control was improving rapidly, and his handling of his kick and genka and increased considerably. And last but not least, that little date with Karena, and it had opened her eyes, and she looked at women with another perspective. It's as if he had been living in a cave and finally found the way out to see in all its splendor the greatest creation on earth. Call him a pervert if you want, but now if he looked at the attributes of a woman. The breasts, the buttocks, the legs, the curves, the angles of the face, the eye color, the hair color, the list went on and on. He was standing in Eden, and he had never noticed. The only bad thing is that it distracted him from his training. Especially at that time he was training not only one, but two beautiful girls. How did you find this place? Hino asked while stretching his muscles so as not to suffer any tears or something like that. It was 5 in the morning, and they were still half asleep, but at that time I had an appointment with Naruto. And I couldn't waste an opportunity like that. Yes, it's gorgeous. Sakura ended up doing the same as the blonde. It was pure luck. Naruto replied, just waiting for the girls to start, he didn't have to do. Okay, let's start with the basics. Chakra control. He walked over to the hot spring lagoon and smiled. Although we call them chakra control exercises, they also increase it exponentially the more you practice it. Climbing a tree is the most basic and therefore even. Little chakra, but walking on water, fell while taking a few steps in front. To the girl's amazement, Naruto was walking on her as if she were the ground itself. How do you do that? Asked the excited Pink Movie. It is at the same time similar and different. To climb a tree, it is similar because you have to connect with the water as if it were the trunk of a tree. To know how and how much chakra you have to channel, but it is different because it varies every second, and you have to be changing the amount constantly around the sole of the foot. They nodded, half understanding what Naruto was telling him, and then how do we do it? Hino asked. Did they bring the bathing suits? Questioned the redhead back. He smiled when the girls nodded. Good, because they will spend a lot of time in the water at first. You will only do it with one foot so that you will realize for yourself how you have to channel the chakra. They went to change quickly and came back wearing and not a two-piece suit in dark blue and Sakura a similar one in lilac. I hadn't noticed, but both are. They were starting to grow up, the blonde a little more than Sakura, but they both already had breasts, and it grew as they did. In addition, the crows were starting to settle deliciously, and their legs seemed endless. He was with his mouth open, watching those two beauties, but he woke up when he heard the giggles of both, blushed and quickly looked away, so as not to continue making a fool of himself. You can watch Naruto, Sakura said excitedly. After all, the redhead was handsome, strong, and despite appreciating them, he was not being a stalker in some other way. You plan to teach us if you don't. He nodded and walked towards them, looking towards the lagoon. You're cute when you're blushing, Hino murmured. The three of them blushed at the comment, and oddly enough Sakura didn't care that Hino said that. You guys are very beautiful, the redhead whispered back. They both felt very warm by the sincere and innocent, to some extent, comment. Anyway, get in the water, and let's get started. They got into the water, and under Naruto's penetrating gaze, they followed his instructions. It was very complicated. Much more than climbing a tree, but they were sure that with Naruto teaching them, they would soon manage to do it, and improve quickly. She had finally left the hospital. Her cousin had really left her injured. He had almost completely damaged a few tenketsu. Her muscles. They were about to be completely torn apart, but more importantly, his heart had almost been damaged beyond repair. If she had stayed fighting, she could have ended up dead for sure, and if she didn't, she would have ended up with lifelong heart problems, and according to what she was told, she would have had to use an artificial respirator constantly so that your heart does not overload and your blood remains oxygenated. After some painful sessions to repair all the damage with healing chakra, she was finally able to leave the hospital, where the only people who had come to visit her were her classmates and Karena and Sensei. She didn't know why she had expected Naruto to come. After all, she had taken it upon herself to push him away a little. No, not in a bad way, but with his constant fainting, it was understandable that he didn't come closer. It could be so as not to hurt him, or simply because that I couldn't make a conversation with someone who was instantly asleep. Anyway, I was sure he would be busy with his training so he could beat Gaara. If she was honest with herself, she was terrified by what that represented, and she wasn't even competing. But Naruto had become very strong in those 6 months that they had hardly seen each other, and he never gave up. That's why I constantly followed him to see if any of that security and confidence stuck to him, but it was of no use. Maybe those qualities were something you were born with and couldn't pass on to someone. But she was tired of being the way she was. She was tired of stuttering all the time. She was tired of everything that she represented. Having found out that she almost died had opened her eyes in a certain way. And not only because she almost died, in a way she knew it could happen if she became Kunoichi. What had shocked her the most was that she was almost killed by her own cousin. He had thought a lot that week at the hospital. He was complaining about Sakura being a Sasuke fangirl. Even if he had never said it out loud, and she was the same, he wondered if she really loved the blonde, now red-haired one. She wondered if she followed him only because he was everything she wanted to be, and she couldn't, but there was no answer for those questions. At least not if she didn't do something to answer them. And the only way was to talk to Naruto, a difficult thing until the exams were over. Or to see if a relationship with someone else could change it. I had read somewhere that it was not love when the other person failed to bring out the best in you while complimenting the worst. She supposed that if Naruto was really her other half, she would have to have the courage to at least talk to him, which wasn't happening. And the way things were going, it wouldn't happen anytime soon. I had also read that if it was love, it didn't have to be hidden in something that it wasn't, but it had to come out as it really was. Something else that it didn't do, there wasn't. Many people who really knew her, not even her sensei, who had practically been her mother. She nodded resolutely. If she couldn't learn with Naruto, she would look for someone who would make her understand whether or not the now red-haired man was truly the man for her. He took the safest step there was given in her life. Too bad she didn't get very far, because she collided with someone who knocked her to the ground by the butt. That hurts, he muttered with his eyes closed. He had hit his forehead against something hard, and his butt suffered in the fall to the ground. Shit, a girl clearly shouted. Fuck, that hurts. Clearly she was very badly spoken. It was the first impression of Hinata, and that I had not seen the girl in the least. I raised my head, blushing for being so clumsy. And just when she decided to change me, she thought mortified, low. I'm sorry, I didn't see you. The girl was almost half a head taller than her, with pale red hair to the height of the buttocks. She was dressed in tight black shorts, a red shirt, and black ninja sandals she was taking of the chin as he bent down slightly. He waved his hand as if he wanted her to shut up. You have a very hard head, he growled as he looked at the blushing girl. When the pain stopped long enough, he was able to stop properly to look at Hinata more attentively. He was on a mission and had to blend in, so it would be nice to start by making a dude, I'm sorry, I tend to be bad-mouthed when I feel frustrated, scared, upset, in pain. She stopped with her list. When I hear a soft but musical and beautiful laugh, practically all the time, then she blushed a little more when he realized that he had talked about more. The redhead laughed a little and blushed. Well, yes, she lowered her gaze for some nervous reason. Whatever you were doing so distracted? Well, I was thinking about things, if that answered quickly. The redhead tilted her head slightly confused, which made her look really cute, but she nodded. Well, she looked around thinking about what else to say, and rubbed her hands on the edge of her shirt. And Nada saw her interested. The girl was cute, and since her hair stood out, it meant that she was not from the village. Or he would have seen her for what? Except once, "You're not from around here, right?" he asked, getting up and shaking his clothes. "I'm not just passing through, I wanted to get to know the famous Leaf Village." And Nada nodded, smiling. She was happy to be able to talk to someone without stuttering. It was strange but very refreshing. "If you want, I can show you the village," she murmured confidently. "It's not like we had a lot of tourist places, that is said, but I know several beautiful places." The redhead smiled and nodded. "I would love that." She blushed slightly, not knowing what happened to her. "Then follow me," Inada mentioned, excited to make a new friend. Now that he realized he had no female friends, Sakura and Ino had always seemed to banal to hang out with them. Maybe this is what a friend needed for a change. Besides, it's not like her classmates are her friends either. Her father was very strict with who he considered a friend. Her stomach roared, making her turn as red as Naruto's new hair. "Sorry." He laughed a little, but for some reason he couldn't take his eyes off the blue movie. That neck-deep blush suited her very well. "I guess the first stop will be a restaurant then." And Mata nodded and smiled slightly. He had overcome something else. He had not fainted from grief. "Thanks, I haven't been eating very well lately." He grimaced, thinking about the hospital food. "But I know the best restaurant in the village. You'll love it." She headed to her favorite restaurant, determined to make the redhead think so too. "By the way, my name is Inada Ikega." I came back to see her, realizing that the redhead had blown her whistle, flushed again, and was scratching the back of his neck. He gave her a piteous smile and stretched out his hand. "I'm Tayuya, nice to meet you." He was looking towards the village from his office window, wondering how bad he really was with Oa, mainly because, even with the change in appearance and his much more measured way of being, everyone hated Naruto. Moreover, he had heard that they said that now, if the fox had taken over the body of his grandson, only some of the people had regretted the treatment they had given to a clearly innocent boy, even if in truth now Naruto. Out with the Kumi. While most had already asked for a hearing, asking for the extermination of the creature before it causes problems like last time. Damn closed-minded idiots. And the worst of all is that I knew the advice had to do with the treatment of Naruto being so bad. Especially a woman from the civil council. I didn't understand her in the least. After all, Naruto was his daughter's partner and had saved her from dying on several occasions. How come Maguki had such a hatred for the boy? How is it that this hatred had multiplied now that apparently his daughter? He was starting to treat Naruto much better than before. I could even say that I was starting to have a good and healthy crush on the guy. Much healthier than his obsession with the Uchiha, because he was getting to know Naruto practically from scratch. And because he was showing his full potential. He had slightly observed Sakura Aruno. Before the exams, Chiknin was a simple girl who wanted attention, but did not do her part to excel. Now, together with Nino Yamanaka, I could see a change. 2 weeks had passed since the end of the preliminaries, and just by watching them walk, I could tell that they were improving. It wasn't very biologically because they were just starting to train, but it was a big change from what it had been like when they had just graduated. Even his chakra had increased exponentially, and he could say that at the end of this month they were training with Naruto. They might start thinking about using elementary ninjutsu category of, but something was something. But they were not the only ones. Apparently that exam had been good not only for Naruto, Sakura and Hino, but also for the other rookies, excluding Sasuke, who had recovered very quickly. And Kakashi had already started training him a long time ago. 1 week. Kiba and Nuzuka asked to be trained by his mother from what he could find out, and apparently the humiliation he had received had managed to lower his ego a little, but inflate his determination to improve. It had been similar with Shiro Aburami, but instead he had been training with Guy to improve his taijutsu. Something that Naruto had also done to a much lesser extent than Guy told him. Naruto had just asked for instructions and was gone. Shikamaru, although he did not train much physically, he had been asking to play ninja class Shojito with him. He was happy because the game greatly improved the tactical idea, both for defense and attack, where the They were very strong, but it didn't hurt to improve and perfect it. Shunji Akimichi was on the same path, although in a very unusual and unique way. He had started eating more than he already did, and meditated with his father every afternoon. It was good because the characteristic jutsu of the Akimichi clan needed a lot of concentration when it came to expanding the body. And although Chunhai could do it easily, to reach the same level as his father would take time, even more so if I kept going where I used to go, that wasn't going anywhere. But perhaps the most surprising one had been Inada Itiga, and not because she was training or anything like that. Most of the time he had been out of the hospital, he had been spending it with a girl he didn't recognize. So she was definitely a foreigner and was out and about in the village. Inada looked much more confident, smiled a lot more, and seemed to be enjoying life for the first time in her short existence. The strange girl had done him good, even though at the moment, only a week after having met her, the only one who could be this cheerful, laughing and luminous, was with her and no one else. They were seen up and down all the time, they went to eat, they walked in the parks. That's what they were going to the cinema for. It could be that he was not improving in the ninja field, but the staff that was much more important to Inada. In that one he was growing alarmingly fast, which made Irizen very happy. The girl was sweet, although somewhat strange, and her way of being made the others. People got a little of that optimism, even if she didn't realize it, because those who did had only seen her from afar. On the other hand, it seemed that one of the most close-knit Genin squadrons the village had split up. Lee Rock had been hospitalized for 2 weeks, of which only 2 days he had finally passed conscious. But the damage done to his limbs was very worrisome, and he was almost sure that there was only one person who could heal him by. At least so that he can walk again without a wheelchair and can eat by himself. But that same woman did not want to see the village even in painting. The girl in the group who a couple of weeks ago would have sworn that she was romantically interested to her last partner, now seemed to prefer to be alone. Tenten trained alone and spent most of her time alone. The only one in her group she had contact with was Lee, who was hospitalized. It seemed that what she had experienced in the exam, not only what happened to her partner, but what the other one did to her family, had withdrawn her and taken her away from it. While Nayuri Kaga, the last of the gay team, was already a loner long before he graduated from the academy. He had the same concern with him that he had with Sasuke Uchiha, that they become renegade ninjas at the slightest possibility of fulfilling his vendettas. The Uchiha was more worrisome, but Neji was not far behind. He could not blame the boy much only. And so Ikea was a cradle and in the ass every time he opened his mouth at council meetings. She didn't want to imagine what it was like to live with that man every day, about 15 hours a day. He sighed wearily. Those 2 weeks had been very hard. At times like that he wondered why on earth he took office again. He had been so happy to retire and leave all that paperwork and stress behind. He should have been drunk when he decided to rejoin. The Chinan exams in particular were always a problem, because I had to arrange everything so that the exams were handled correctly, and ended up the same way. He also had to take care of arranging everything so that the visitors who showed up to watch the finals would be comfortable. Not so much the civilians, but the hunting party and the few Suna Council members who congregated. Well, my people, this was all from my side. I hope you will like it as much as I did. Leave your like, share and subscribe. A greeting and a hug.